Welcome to Anatomy of the Extraordinary, the podcast that unveils true, remarkable stories from the edges of human experience. I'm your host, and today we dive into another extraordinary journey.
Okay, so picture this. It is September 1935.
Right.
New York City. We are standing on the sidewalk just outside the Federal House of Detention in Manhattan.
They called it the Tombs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, if you look at the historical architectural photos from the files you sent over for this deep dive, you can see just how imposing this structure really was.
Oh, yeah, it was massive. And widely considered to be entirely, unequivocally escape-proof. I mean, thick walls, heavy iron everywhere, constant guard patrols.
Right, so it's broad daylight. The streets down below are just bustling with pedestrians, cars, the whole cacophony of a city trying to drag itself out of the Great Depression.
Yeah, lots of noise, lots of people.
And here's the thing. If you were standing there and you happened to just look up to a third-story window, you would see something, frankly, impossible.
You see a man.
Okay.
And he has just painstakingly torn his coarse prison bed sheets into these long strips.
He's ripping them up.
Right, and he's braided them together to form this crude rope. Plus, he has somehow acquired a pair of heavy wire-cutting pliers.
Which he smuggled in, obviously.
We have to assume so, yeah. Probably through some network he charmed into existence inside the prison. And he is systematically snipping through the heavy, reinforced wire mesh of his cell window.
Okay, so he squeezes his body through this narrow gap, and now he is literally dangling 3 stories above the unforgiving concrete.
Yeah.
His hands have to be burning from the friction of this makeshift rope. His arms are trembling under his own weight, and he starts to rappel down the side of this impenetrable fortress.
And here's the craziest part of the whole scene. People on the sidewalk actually start to notice.
I mean, of course they do. It's broad daylight.
Right. They point, they look up, they literally see a man hanging from a third-story prison window on a rope made of bed sheets.
So the gig is up, right?
Yeah.
I mean, someone's going to alert the guards. The police are going to swarm the place.
Well, for anyone else, yes, panic would totally set in. But not for him. As this crowd gathers down below, this man casually reaches into his pocket with his free hand.
While dangling.
From a makeshift rope, suspended above the street, he pulls out a dirty rag, and he simply begins wiping the window glass in front of him.
Wait, he pretends to be a window washer in the middle of a prison escape.
Exactly. He wipes the glass, he looks down at the people below, and he just gives them this polite working man's nod.
Oh, wow.
And the crowd, they just lose interest. They nod back. They figure, anyone acting that calm, doing something that mundane, well, he must belong there.
That is wild.
So they keep walking. He reaches the ground, blends seamlessly into the afternoon foot traffic, and just vanishes into the labyrinth of New York.
Okay, the man who just pulled off that daylight vanishing act is Victor Lustig.
The Phantom himself.
Yeah, a man with at least 45 known aliases. A guy who achieved some of the most massive, audacious, honestly impossible heists of the 20th century. And the kicker, he never fired a single weapon.
Not once.
He never used a drop of physical violence. So when you handed over this giant stack of historical texts and FBI anecdotes and crime museum records, our mission for this deep dive was basically to deconstruct the man the press called the miracle man of crime.
Because it really is a journey into the architecture of a lie. How you build it, how you sustain it, and how you trap a human mind inside it so thoroughly that the victim essentially locks the door from the inside.
Okay, let's unpack this right away, because the paradox here is really making my head spin. It's like a magician who walks up to you on the street, looks you dead in the eye, tells you he's going to steal your watch, and instead of stopping him, you actually thank him for it.
Maybe even give him a tip.
Right. How did nobody notice? I mean, how do you steal massive fortunes from really powerful people without holding a gun to their head?
Well, because a gun forces compliance. And compliance, it breeds resentment and resistance. Lustig didn't want compliance, he wanted complicity.
He wanted them in on it.
Exactly. He wanted his victims to actively desire to hand over their money. He wanted them to think the whole thing was their idea. And to understand how he built that kind of psychological trap, we really have to look at the environment that forged him.
So we have to look at his origins. Based on the biographical files you shared, we're going way back to the year 1890.
Right.
He's born in a town called Arno in Bohemia. which was then part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire but is now the Czech Republic. His real name, supposedly, is Robert Miller, or perhaps Molnar.
The records from that era are incredibly murky.
Which is beautifully fitting for a guy like this.
Yeah.
But he's born into what appears to be a very respectable middle-class Catholic family. His father is a tobacco goods salesman and, remarkably, eventually becomes the mayor of the town.
Yeah, a real figure of authority.
But the documents suggest that behind closed doors, his childhood was an absolute nightmare. The father was strictly, violently abusive.
And this right here is the crucible. We really cannot gloss over this part. His father wasn't just strict, he was a tyrant who wielded his authority like a bludgeon.
Yeah.
The historical records detail this one incident where the father forced an 8-year-old Victor to sign a formal written oath, swearing to abstain from alcohol forever.
An 8-year-old.
Right. He also forced him into violin lessons that the kid vehemently despised. And when young Victor inevitably resisted, or just failed to meet these impossible standards of perfection, his father took that same violin and literally beat the child over the head with it.
That is horrific.
Yeah.
But, I mean, lots of people, unfortunately, suffer terrible childhoods and they don't become international masterminds of deception.
True.
They might become violent themselves or withdrawn.
Yeah.
How does this specific trauma forge con man?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it's really about the destruction of the illusion of moral authority. Think about the father's position in the town.
He's the mayor.
Exactly. He is the arbiter of the law. He's the guy who stands up in the town square and tells everyone else how to live righteously. And yet this same man goes home and shatters a wooden instrument over his son's head. So when the person who represents the moral order of your universe is secretly a monster, what happens to your worldview?
You realize the rules are fake.
Precisely. You realize that authority is just a performance. It's just a suit you put on, it's a title you claim. If the ultimate rule maker is a total hypocrite, then the rules are just suggestions for the gullible.
That makes total sense.
It breeds this profound, cynical rebellion. He learned early on that adults, particularly powerful men, wear masks. And if everyone is wearing a mask, well, you just have to learn how to craft a better one.
So he rebels against the hypocrisy. By 1904, he's a teenager, and he runs away from home. His family sends him to a prestigious boarding school in Dresden, hoping to straighten him out, but he ends up dropping out.
Yeah, school wasn't for him.
But he is hyper-intelligent. He becomes fluent in 5 languages: English, French, Italian, Hungarian, and German. He spends time drifting around, eventually ending up at the Sorbonne in Paris, where he gets into a brutal knife fight over a lover.
A classic Parisian origin story.
Right. And that's where he gets his trademark, a deep, prominent scar running down the left side of his face, from his eye all the way to his ear. Which immediately made me wonder, if your entire life depends on blending in and not being recognized, wouldn't a massive, gruesome facial scar make you a terrible criminal? You're literally a walking police sketch.
You would think so, wouldn't you? But he used it. He didn't try to hide it. He weaponized it. He really leaned into it.
How so?
The scar gave him this air of danger, of worldly experience. Like he was some European aristocracy that had seen the dark side of life. It made him memorable in exactly the right way. And he took that carefully curated persona straight to the ultimate training ground for his craft.
The ocean liners.
Yes, the luxury ocean liners of the early 20th century.
The transatlantic crossings.
Yeah.
These massive floating palaces traveling between France and New York right before the First World War.
Exactly. And we really have to understand the specific socioeconomic climate of these ships to get why this worked.
Yeah.
You have to picture the dining rooms on these liners. This is the Gilded Age colliding with the Old World. You have a captive audience of the newly wealthy. American industrialists, steel magnates, railroad tycoons. They have absolutely unimaginable wealth. But what do they lack?
Class. Pedigree.
Cultural cachet. They are desperate to feel sophisticated. They want to be associated with the arts, with European nobility, with high society. They are incredibly insecure about their new money status.
So they're vulnerable.
Extremely. Lustig realized early on that you don't con a poor man. You con a rich man who is desperate to prove he belongs in an even higher class.
Wow.
He would board these ships in first class, posing as a wealthy Broadway producer looking for investments or an aristocratic count, and he would just play their insecurities like a piano.
Just totally reeling them in.
He would let them win at cards for a few nights, build up their ego, let them buy him drinks, and eventually they would practically beg him to let them invest in his fake ventures just to feel like they were part of his exclusive world.
But then World War I breaks out, right? The oceans fill with U-boats, the luxury liner era grinds to a halt, and Lustig has to pivot to land.
He had to adapt.
And this brings us to one of his most infamous and honestly mechanically fascinating early scams, the Romanian box.
Ah, yes. Also known as the money box.
Now, the notes you provided mention he sold this box to people, but I want to know how it actually worked, because people aren't just going to hand over thousands of dollars for a magic trick unless it's incredibly convincing.
Oh, it was a masterclass in theatrical props and applied psychology. Lustig would present this beautifully crafted mahogany box. It was roughly the size of a steamer trunk. He actually had it custom built by a cabinet maker.
So it looked legit.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
It's covered in brass dials, little levers, and narrow slots. It looked incredibly complex, heavy, and scientific. He would tell his mark that this machine used a highly advanced secret chemical process, along with a series of mechanical rollers, to flawlessly duplicate currency.
So wait, what was the actual mechanical trick inside the box?
Well, the box was essentially a highly sophisticated, false-bottomed cabinet. Inside, totally hidden from view, were precise mechanical rollers and a hidden compartment.
Okay.
Before the meeting, Lustig would take genuine high-denomination bills, say, a real $100 bill, and preload them into that hidden compartment. During the demonstration, he would ask the mark for a $100 bill of their own.
Just to prove it works with their money.
Exactly. He would insert the mark's bill into one slot and a blank piece of paper cut to the exact same size into another slot. He would turn the brass dials, crank a lever, and the mark's bill and the blank paper would be drawn inside the machine.
And then it just spits out the duplicate.
No, and this is the absolute genius part. If it spit it out immediately, it would feel like a cheap parlor trick, a magician's sleight of hand. Lustig tells them the chemical process of transferring the ink and breaking down the paper fibers takes 6 to 18 hours.
Ah, so he built in a waiting period.
He builds anticipation, he builds greed. They go out to an extravagant dinner, they drink expensive wine, they talk about what they're going to do with their limitless wealth.
Just letting the fantasy marinate.
Hours later, they return to the room. The machine clicks, whirs, and finally spits out 2 bills. Lustig insists the mark take the copied bill, which is actually the genuine bill Lustig hid inside earlier to the bank to verify it.
And of course, the bank teller looks at it, checks the watermark, feels the paper, and says, yep, this is a perfect, genuine $100 bill. Because it is a genuine bill.
Right. He fundamentally alters their reality. They hold the physical proof in their hands. The bank, the ultimate authority on money, confirms it.
Their brains just shut down.
Their greed immediately overrides their critical thinking. They want the box. They demand to buy the box. And Lustig, playing the reluctant, eccentric genius, eventually agrees to part with it for tens of thousands of dollars, which, adjusted for inflation, is roughly $500,000 today. He hands over the box, packs up his bags, and disappears. The mark takes the box home, runs out of preloaded genuine bills, and realizes the machine is just spitting out blank paper.
But here's where the story gets really unbelievable. He pulls this scam on a literal law enforcement officer.
Yes.
According to the FBI anecdotes in our files, a Texas sheriff sources refer to him as either Richards or Miller buys the box. He pays thousands for it. He takes it home, operates it, gets blank paper, and realizes he's been conned.
A very bad guy-to-con.
Exactly. Now, this sheriff doesn't just call the local precinct to file a report. He is furious. He tracks Lustig down across the country to a hotel room in Chicago. He bursts through the door, pulls out his service weapon, and shoves the barrel right into Lustig's chest.
Let's just pause and consider the stakes here. You are in a hotel room in the 1920s. A furious, humiliated Texas sheriff has a loaded gun pressed against your ribs.
I would be weeping on the floor.
Most people would dissolve. They would beg for their lives. They would confess to everything.
But what does Lustig do? He doesn't flinch. He doesn't raise his hands. He looks this furious armed sheriff dead in the eye and calmly says, "You must have operated the machine wrong."
It is breathtaking. He goes entirely on the offensive. He starts using rapid-fire technical jargon about the chemical rollers and the brass dials, completely overwhelming the sheriff's cognitive processing.
Just baffling him with nonsense.
He essentially gaslights the man with a gun. He makes the sheriff feel technically incompetent.
And it works. Lustig says, "Look, clearly you don't understand the delicate machinery. I will travel back to Texas with you and calibrate it myself. But to show you I am acting in good faith, here is a complete refund of your money in cash to apologize for the inconvenience."
The ultimate de-escalation.
He reaches into his trunk and hands the sheriff a massive stack of crisp bills. The sheriff is so disarmed by this calmness and so relieved to have his money back that he put his gun away, takes the cash, and leaves the hotel.
The tension is completely diffused.
It's totally diffused. But, oh, the sheer brilliance of the twist.
There is always a twist with Lustig.
The refund Lustig gave the sheriff. Pure counterfeit money.
Yep.
The sheriff travels all the way back to Texas, goes to spend the money, and is immediately arrested by his own colleagues for passing fake bills.
I mean, the absolute psychological dominance it takes to pull that off.
What's fascinating here is that Lustig understood a core, deeply uncomfortable truth about human nature. We are desperate to save face.
Right.
The sheriff was deeply, profoundly humiliated that he, a man of the law, had fallen for a scam. When Lustig offered him a narrative that said, hey, you aren't a gullible fool, it's just a highly sensitive technical machine, and here is your money back. The sheriff's brain eagerly, desperately grabbed onto that narrative.
Because the truth was too painful.
The alternative, admitting to himself and his peers that he was a mark, was psychologically intolerable. Lustig weaponized the sheriff's own ego against him.
Which brings us to the escalation, the absolute pinnacle of his obsession with the grift. Because if you've just scammed an American lawman, embarrassed him to his core, and left him holding counterfeit money, you cannot stay in the United States. The heat is way too high.
You need a different playground. And in 1925, there was no better playground than Paris. Let's set the atmosphere for a moment. When you think of the Eiffel Tower today, you think of the romantic symbol of France. Proposals, sparkling lights.
But in 1925, based on the historical texts, it was widely hated.
Really hated.
It was essentially considered a rusted, decaying eyesore. We have to understand the industrial reality of the structure back then. The Eiffel Tower was built for the 1889 World's Fair, and it was only supposed to be a temporary exhibition.
Wait, temporary?
Yeah. It was legally meant to stand for 20 years and then be dismantled and sold off. It was constructed of 7,000 tons of puddle iron.
Okay, what exactly is puddle iron? Why is that detail important to the scam?
Well, puddle iron is an early form of wrought iron that was created by manually stirring molten iron in a reverberatory furnace to burn off the carbon. It's strong, but unlike modern steel, it is incredibly vulnerable to the elements.
So it rusts.
It rusts aggressively. The tower is held together by 2.5 million rivets, and to keep it from collapsing into a pile of red dust, it requires a fresh coat of paint every 7 years. And not just a little paint. We are talking about 60 tons of specialized paint applied by hand.
That sounds wildly expensive.
The maintenance costs were an absolute nightmare for the city. The Parisian elite, the artists, the politicians, they despised it. Famous writers like Guy de Maupassant supposedly ate lunch at the tower's base every day just so he wouldn't have to look at it on the skyline.
That's hilarious.
The newspapers were aggressively debating whether the city should just tear the whole thing down and sell it for scrap.
And one morning, Victor Lustig is sitting at an outdoor cafe in Paris, drinking an espresso, and he reads one of these newspaper articles complaining about the astronomical cost of the Eiffel Tower's upkeep.
Just reading the paper.
Right. And for anyone else, it's just a boring civic news story, a complaint about taxes. But for Lustig, it's a script. He doesn't see a rusty tower. He sees the ultimate prop.
He decides to sell the Eiffel Tower.
Wait, hold on. You can't just sell a massive public monument. It's standing right there in the middle of the city. How does a scrap metal dealer not immediately call the mayor's office to verify this? That makes no logical sense.
It doesn't make logical sense, no. But it makes perfect psychological sense if you control the environment. And his preparation is meticulous. First, he hires a master forger to create flawless, highly official French government stationery.
Setting the stage.
He gives himself a fabricated title, Deputy Director General of the Ministry of Posts and Telegraphs. He sends out letters on this imposing official letterhead to the 6 most elite, wealthy scrap metal dealers in Paris, inviting them to a highly confidential meeting at the Hotel de Crillon.
The Crillon. That is not just any hotel. That is one of the most opulent, prestigious, terrifyingly expensive hotels in the city, known for hosting diplomats and signing treaties.
Exactly. Notice the environment he constructs.
Yeah.
Heavy velvet drapes, the hushed tones, the expensive cigars, the oak-paneled private rooms. He is manufacturing an atmosphere of exclusive, unquestionable authority.
It's all theater.
When these 6 wealthy industrialists arrive, Lustig explains that the government has secretly decided they can no longer afford the maintenance. They're going to tear down the tower and sell the 7,000 tons of puddle iron to the highest bidder.
Wow.
But, he says, we must keep this absolutely strictly confidential. If the public finds out before the deal is finalized, there will be riots in the streets. He weaponizes the concept of public outcry.
So by demanding secrecy to prevent a riot, he essentially guarantees that none of these men will go to the press or talk to other city officials to verify his story.
They can't, or they lose the deal.
If they talk, they lose out. They feel like they are part of a state-sanctioned, exclusive conspiracy. They feel chosen.
And while he's giving this grand speech, conducting this symphony of deception, he isn't just talking. He is quietly, surgically studying the 6 men in the room. He's looking for the weak link.
The perfect target.
The one with the exact right combination of greed, ambition, and deep-seated insecurity. And he finds him.
A man named André Poisson.
André Poisson. He was a successful businessman, yes, but he was new to the inner circle of the Parisian elite. He was a provincial man trying to make it in the big city.
So he's looking for validation.
He was desperate to be recognized, to be seen as a major player. Buying the scrap rights to the Eiffel Tower would instantly cement his legacy in the capital. He would be a titan of industry. But Poisson has a problem. His wife.
The wife. She is highly suspicious of the whole thing. She asks all the right, logical questions. Like, why is this moving so fast? Why is everything so aggressively secret? Why are we meeting in a hotel room and not a government building?
She's a smart woman.
She is dangerously close to pulling Poisson out of the deal. The whole scam is on the verge of total collapse. How does he get around a deeply suspicious spouse?
He executes a pivot that is, frankly, terrifying in its psychological brilliance. He doesn't try to reassure Poisson with more fake documents. He doesn't act indignant or offended that his authority is being questioned. Instead, he calls Poisson to a private one-on-one meeting back at the hotel.
Okay, so he sits Poisson down, and he drops his voice. He looks nervously over his shoulder. He confesses. He says, look, André, between you and me, the truth is my salary as a government official is, well, it's meager. I have a certain lifestyle to maintain here in Paris. It is very difficult for a man in my position to make ends meet.
He leans right into it.
He implies very heavily that he needs a personal bribe beneath the table to ensure Poisson wins the contract over the other 5 dealers.
Yeah.
I mean, let's just stop and think about the ethics and the absolute dark void of ethics here. He used his own fabricated corruption as proof of his authenticity.
Yes.
He is already scamming the guy for the purchase price of a national monument, and he asks for a bribe on top of it.
It is the darkest, most brilliant application of empathy you will ever see. Lustig didn't just hack a bank account. He hacked Poisson's entire worldview. Poisson was a businessman navigating 1920s France. What did he expect a high-level government official to be?
Corrupt. He expected them all to be corrupt.
Exactly. When the process was clean and secretive, Poisson's wife was suspicious. It felt wrong because it didn't match their cynical view of the world. But the moment Lustig asked for a dirty bribe beneath the table, the situation suddenly fit the exact mental model Poisson had of how the world really worked.
The bribe made the scam feel real.
It made Poisson feel safe. He thought, I understand this game now. This is how the elites actually do business. Lustig allowed Poisson's own cynicism to completely blind him.
So Poisson hands over a massive, massive sum. The exact amount is heavily debated by historians. Some sources in our stack say 70,000 francs. Others say it was well over 1 million francs. But regardless, it is an absolute fortune.
Plus the bribe money.
Plus he hands over the fat envelope of cash for the bribe. Lustig hands over a beautifully forged bill of sale for the Eiffel Tower, shakes Poisson's hand, walks out of the Hotel de Crillon, and immediately gets on a train to Vienna with a suitcase full of cash.
And then he just waits. In Vienna, he lives a life of luxury. He buys the Parisian newspapers every morning, sipping his coffee, waiting for the massive explosive headline, government official scams businessman out of Eiffel Tower.
But the headline never comes. Days pass. Weeks pass. Nothing. Because Poissonnerie Poisson is so utterly destroyed, so deeply humiliated by the realization that he bought a public monument from a con man, that he never goes to the police.
He can't. The embarrassment would ruin him.
He simply eats the massive financial loss to protect his pride and his business reputation. It is the perfect crime. The victim enforces his own silence.
It was so perfect, and the silence was so absolute, that a month later, Lustig's ego actually got the better of him. He returned to Paris, gathered a different group of scrap dealers, and tried to sell the Eiffel Tower a second time.
Which is just pushing your luck beyond the bounds of sanity.
Oh, absolutely.
And he did push it too far. The second Mark got suspicious and immediately went to the police, forcing Lustig to abandon the deal and flee back to the United States on a ship. But the legend was already cemented. He was the man who sold the Eiffel Tower.
He was untouchable in his own mind.
So he's forced back to the U.S. It's 1926. And the escalation continues because Lustig is clearly addicted to the thrill. The money isn't the point anymore, it's the game. He decides to walk willingly into the absolute lion's den. He approaches the most dangerous, violent, paranoid man in America, Al Capone.
To understand the sheer suicidal insanity of this, you have to understand who Al Capone was in Chicago in 1926. This is a man who solves minor logistical disputes with a submachine gun.
Right.
In the text we reviewed, there's a chilling detail about Capone's office. He allegedly had a hidden button under his mahogany desk that opened a secret wall panel to reveal a bodyguard pointing a machine gun right at the guest chair. You do not scam Al Capone. You do not even look at him wrong.
So how do you even approach a guy like Capone without getting killed on the front steps?
You play to his ego. Lustig manages to secure a meeting by projecting absolute confidence. He walks into Capone's office, immaculate suit, European charm, completely unfazed by the thugs in the room.
He looks Capone in the eye and asks for $50,000. He promises he has a foolproof scheme to invest it and double it in exactly 60 days.
Just right to his face.
Capone looks at him, probably thinking this guy is completely insane, but he is intrigued by the audacity. He agrees. He hands over the $50,000 in cash, but he gives Lustig a chilling, explicit warning about the deadly consequences of betraying him.
And what does Lustig do with the money? Does he invest it in a rigged horse race? Does he buy illicit liquor?
He does absolutely nothing. He literally walks out of Capone's headquarters, goes straight to a bank in Chicago, rents a safe deposit box, and locks the $50,000 inside. He doesn't invest a dime.
Right.
He doesn't flee to South America. He just lets it sit there in the dark.
For exactly 60 days.
Then he goes back to the bank, takes the untouched stacks of cash, and walks back into Al Capone's office.
Picture the room. The air is thick with cigar smoke. Capone is waiting, surrounded by armed men. Lustig walks in, looks down at the floor, and puts on an absolute masterclass in acting.
Oh, I bet.
He looks devastated. His shoulders are slumped. He tells Capone, "I am so sorry. The scheme failed. The deal fell through. I am completely ruined."
Capone is probably reaching for the hidden button under his desk.
But then, right as the tension peaks, Lustig reaches into his coat, pulls out the original untouched $50,000, and places it neatly on Capone's desk. He looks up and says, "I may be ruined, but I would never steal from you. Here is your money back."
And Capone's brain just short-circuits.
It literally breaks Capone's mental framework. Think about the environment Capone inhabits. He lives in a binary world. People either fear him and obey, or they betray him and he has them killed.
There's no middle ground.
Yeah. None. Encountering genuine honesty, someone voluntarily returning $50,000 when they could have run for the border, was something Capone had no neurological pathway to process. He is so stunned, so deeply moved by this perceived integrity that he reaches into his pocket and hands Lustig a cash reward on the spot.
No way.
Yes. Some historical sources say it was $1,000, some say $5,000. He tells Lustig to take it to help him get back on his feet.
It's mind-blowing. Lustig conned Al Capone by doing absolutely nothing. He didn't steal. He just played Capone's own psychological conditioning against him. He knew that to a man who lives in an ocean of violence and betrayal, a single manufactured drop of fake honesty is worth its weight in gold.
It's the exact same architecture as the Eiffel Tower scam. He isn't manipulating the physical environment. He is manipulating the mark's expectations of the environment.
But the hubris is growing. He feels invincible. By the 1930s, the Great Depression has hit the United States hard. Money is incredibly scarce. So Lustig decides, if money is scarce, I will simply manufacture my own. He partners with a man named William Watts. Watts is a brilliant pharmacist and chemist who used his skills to forge incredibly convincing whiskey labels during Prohibition. Together with another man, Tom Shaw, they build an underground counterfeiting empire. But I need to know, how is this money so flawless? Why couldn't the banks tell the difference?
Because they didn't just use standard, flat, offset printing. They used an intaglio printing process.
Explain that for us. How does intaglio work?
Intaglio is the exact same technique the federal government uses to print real currency. Instead of just pressing ink onto the surface of the paper, intaglio requires master engravers to carve microscopic grooves into heavy metal plates.
Very precise.
Highly precise. The ink is applied to the plate, then wiped off the surface, so it only remains in the deeply carved grooves. Then, using immense mechanical pressure, the paper is forced into those grooves to pick up the ink. It creates a raised, textured feel on the paper. You can literally feel the ink standing up off the surface.
So you run your thumb over the lapel of Ben Franklin's coat and you can feel the ridges.
Exactly. Most counterfeiters couldn't afford or operate intaglio presses. Watts and Lustig did. They captured the microscopic details. They flooded the U.S. economy with millions of fake dollars. The money was so flawless, so perfectly textured, that it became known in law enforcement circles simply as Lustig money.
Wow!
It was so prevalent and the volume was so massive that it actually threatened to destabilize the already fragile, terrified, Depression-era economy.
It gets so bad that the Secret Service launches a massive dedicated task force. Their sole objective, hunt down Victor Lustig. The noose is tightening. He's traveling constantly, utilizing his 45 aliases, slipping through their fingers again and again. But what finally brings him down?
Not what you'd expect.
Right. It wasn't a brilliant detective decoding a hidden cipher. It wasn't a fingerprint left on an intaglio printing press.
No, it was human emotion. The one chaotic variable he could not control or manufacture.
May 1935. The betrayal. There are two prevailing historical theories in the documents you provided, and both are dripping with poetic justice. One theory says his mistress, a former brothel owner named Billy Mae Scheibel, found out Lustig was cheating on her with a much younger woman.
A classic motive.
The other theory says it was his long-suffering ex-wife, Roberta, who had finally had enough of his endless affairs, his lies, his double lives. Either way, a woman whose heart he had coldly manipulated picked up the telephone and made an anonymous call to the federal authorities.
She gave them his exact location. It is the ultimate crushing irony. The man who made a spectacular career out of meticulously manipulating human emotions, who treated people as mechanical levers to be pulled, was brought down because he failed to respect the unpredictable, destructive power of a broken heart.
The Secret Service swoops in. They corner him in New York. And while Lustig tries his usual charm offensive, playing dumb, acting like an innocent European gentleman who has been terribly misunderstood, they search him. And they find a smoking gun. It's a single, unassuming key in his pocket. That key leads them to a public locker in the Times Square subway station. They open it up, and inside they find $51,000 in flawless counterfeit bills and the Holy Grail, the master intaglio engraving plates. It is definitively over.
Which brings us back full circle to where we started this deep dive, September 1935. He's locked in the federal house of detention, facing certain ruin. He makes that incredible cinematic escape out the window with the bed sheets, pretending to be a window washer to calm the crowd.
But the magic has finally run out.
His escape only lasts 27 days. He is tracked down and recaptured in Pittsburgh. There's no fast-talking his way out of this one, no refunds in fake cash. He is sentenced to 20 years in federal prison.
And they don't send him to a white-collar country club. They send him to Alcatraz, the Rock.
Where, in a bizarre twist of fate, he is reunited with his old mark, Al Capone. But the environment of Alcatraz was not something Lustig could negotiate with. You cannot con the cold stone walls. You cannot bribe the damp, freezing fog rolling in off the San Francisco Bay.
It's too harsh.
The brutal conditions broke his physical health. He developed severe respiratory issues. After years of suffering, he was transferred to a medical facility for federal prisoners in Springfield, Missouri. And there, in March 1947, Victor Lustig died of pneumonia.
The man who lived 45 lives, who spoke 5 languages flawlessly, who sold the Eiffel Tower, dies in a sterile prison hospital bed. But there is one final, ultimate irony in the records. I read the details of his official death certificate. In the box for his occupation, the attending clerk wrote, apprentice salesman and counterfeiter.
Apprentice. After everything he pulled off, after the millions he stole, the crushing bureaucracy of the state reduced him to an amateur. It was the government having the final, sarcastic word on a life lived entirely as a mirage.
Before he died, though, Lustig left something behind. A psychological manifesto. The 10 Commandments for con men. It was recorded by the Secret Service agents who hunted him. I want to read a few of these because they are chilling when you think about them. Let's hear them. Number 1. Be a patient listener. Number 3, wait for the other person to reveal any political opinions, then agree with them. Number 4, let the other person reveal religious views, then have the same ones. Number 8, never boast. Just let your importance be quietly obvious.
Look closely at those rules. They aren't technical instructions on how to pick a padlock or how to forge a signature on a bank draft. They are instructions on how to become a human mirror. Extreme, weaponized empathy.
Just reflecting them back.
Exactly. He was a blank canvas onto which his victims projected their deepest desires, their biases, their need for validation. He didn't force them into anything. He simply removed the friction between what they desperately wanted to believe and the reality he was presenting.
He used a dark mirror. He reflected exactly what you wanted to see until you willingly handed over everything you had.
And that is the true, enduring legacy of Victor Lustig. He exposed the fundamental vulnerability in the human operating system, our desperate need for our own biases to be confirmed. He didn't steal people's money. He allowed their own greed, their own deep-seated insecurities, and their own massive egos to hand it over to him.
Which brings us to today. You were listening to this right now, and as we were going through these notes, maybe you were thinking, wow, people in the 1920s were so incredibly gullible. I would never buy a public monument from a guy in a hotel.
A lot of people think that.
But think about the modern digital world we navigate right now.
Every highly targeted phishing email that mimics your bank's graphics perfectly. Every crypto scam promising to double your investment in 60 days, just like he promised Capone. Every deepfake video that uses artificial intelligence to perfectly replicate the face and voice of someone you trust.
It's all the same trick.
The technology has evolved, yes, but the psychological hardware they are exploiting, it is the exact same hardware Victor Lustig exploited in that Paris hotel room in 1925.
It is the exact same vulnerability. So as you navigate the world today, swiping on your phone, clicking links, reading your emails, ask yourself a question. When someone online, or on the phone, or even standing right in front of you, offers you exactly what you secretly desire, are they truly seeing you? Or are they just looking at the blueprints of the Eiffel Tower?
Thank you for joining us on this adventure. Until next time, if you enjoyed this episode, please share it and keep seeking the extraordinary.